Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Wednesday evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We are broadcasting live here in our Washington, D.C. studio. As you can see, right behind me is the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. This Capitol building, right here in Washington, D.C. Pro-Trump supporters stormed into the Capitol building, and a security breach happened there. Let's get you caught up on what happened today in D.C., the nation's capital. The Trump-Biden transition live updates. Pro-Trump supporters storm the Capitol building. Trump now has told them to go home after urging them to march on the Capitol. President Donald Trump is slated to hand over control of the White House to President-elect Joe Biden in 14 days. Your top headlines. Trump tries to justify chaos at the Capitol. President Bush releases a statement on insurrections at the Capitol. Manchin says Senate intends to finish business. These thugs are not running us off. Electoral College ballots rescued from the Senate floor, says a Democrat senator. Trump calls on support who attacked the Capitol to go home. The president caused this protest to occur. He's the only one who can make it stop, Chris Christie said. Biden calls on Trump to step up in violence at the Capitol. Entire D.C. National Guard activated to deal with the protesters. Democrats' leadership calls on Trump to demand protesters to leave. Trump watching chaos unfold on television at the White House. Trump said protests would be wild. Political leaders decry rhetoric as chaos erupts. Congress members urge the president to condemn the violence. Members of Congress and former White House officials are criticizing the president and calling on him to stop the violence after pro-Trump supporters and protesters breached the Capitol building Wednesday in a stunning scene. Take a look at these photos of what happened in the Capitol building today. Take a look at these images. These protesters, pro-Trump protesters, broke into the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Look at what they did. President Trump indicated his followers to violence. They stormed the Capitol and stomped the House and Senate in session. We do not know at this point the exact of the damage or injuries they have caused. Bunch of senators took to Twitter. Look at this one protester sitting in the chamber. This is a scene earlier this evening as the police tried to get the protesters off of the Capitol building. They used tear gas, as you can see. Those are some images from the scene, what happened at the Capitol building today. And here is a scene of the Capitol building right now this evening. As you can see, there are still police lights around the Capitol building, as you can all see. Capitol breached by pro-Trump protesters. A woman shot inside has died. This comes as the Senate met about the election. A woman was shot and killed during a standoff inside the U.S. Capitol between law enforcement and supporters of President Donald Trump, who breached the building, forcing a lockdown with members of Congress inside. Protesters, some of who were seen wearing body armor, made their way up the steps around 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time, pushing through the barricades. Officers in riot gear and other security measures put in place in anticipation of the protest. A woman was shot inside the Capitol and rushed to the hospital. Police said the unidentified woman died later in the evening, sources told ABC News. The D.C. mayor issues a curfew, which went into effect at 6 o'clock p.m. and will be in effect until 6 o'clock a.m. Take a look at this live view in D.C. right now.
So that is the very latest here. Police are just slowly inching forward and moving this line, as you can see right here behind me. Michelle, Jonathan?
Well, Carl, because kind of what we saw with some of the protests over the summer, what they're doing is they're rounding you up, and then all of a sudden they're going to push in from one side, and that's how they make quick, effective arrests. So, we don't want to bail you out, so you might want to back up, give it a little more space if you would, Carl. All right, be careful out there.
They're going to encircle the people that are there, and those who are in the middle will then be arrested.
They get a free pair of handcuffs for a little while.
It's the same tactics that we saw in the summer during those protests.
Exactly right.
And they're playing out again here.
But it begs the question, too, and Dave, we can bring you in on this, too, is where was this level of security this afternoon when we knew that thousands of Trump supporters not only were descending upon D.C., which we've seen before, and it's, there's been a few skirmishes, nothing crazy, but then we knew during the president's address at 11 o'clock, he was telling them, we're going to walk up to the Capitol. What did they think they were going to do?
If you needed a wake-up call, all you had to do was pay attention to what the president told the crowd there on the ellipse, because his words to them basically were, you need to go up there and you need to take this situation over and bring it back, because it's up to you if it's going to get done. And that's exactly what they did. They went up there, and when they got to Capitol Hill, it's a relatively short walk from the ellipse up the hill, by my count about 7 blocks, something like that. Anyway, it didn't take long for them to get up there, and that's when things immediately went off the cliff. The after-action reports on all this are going to be fascinating, because there is going to be a really strong push from Capitol Hill, both sides of the aisle, to ask the Capitol Police Force, their commanders, and the security apparatus on the Hill, what happened?
Yeah,
how did we get so behind the curve on this?
Right.
And you saw that one Capitol Hill police officer who was outnumbered grossly, and he ran for his baton, and then he tried to force back a couple of people, but it was one man
up the staircase.
against dozens.
Here's the deal. If you're a lawmaker or a staffer or you work in the Capitol in any capacity, You know, you assume that you're going to have a safe place to be. But I don't understand how the
Let's get to
security
our Heather
could have
Brad.
dropped off that
She
badly.
is out there,
Classic
and apparently
example. Yeah,
police
we
are
can-
asking her for press credentials. Heather, are you there? What's happening?
Hi, Michelle. Yes, I can hear you. You see, I have my press credential in my hand, and that's because we were talking about that police tactic. We've seen it used, we saw it used during the protest this summer. When it gets past the curfew and they're about to make those arrests, the police kind of build that circle around the remaining protesters. That's what we're seeing right now. Well, so we ended up kind of in the middle of that circle of law enforcement officers. You can see there's a few protesters within this circle right now, and so we wanted to make sure we were in a safe place. And you heard the officer, I think you heard that over IFB, Michelle, as he said, they said, where's your press pass? You can get out of the circle if you show us your press pass. So that's why we always carry this with us. The 6 p.m. curfew put in place by D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser does not apply to the media, so we are not in violation of the curfew, but we did not want to be inside that circle that law enforcement has now formed here. This is all happening on the west side of the Capitol, so I want to have my photographer see if we can come a little bit closer, if we can kind of bring our camera in to show through some of these officers' shoulders. You'll see this remaining group of protesters that are here.
Okay, as you can see, there is a curfew in D.C. that is in effect until 6 a.m. tomorrow. And there are still protesters on the street, and as you heard, she said, they're doing a circle, and then the people in that circle will get arrested.
And if police officers would move forward.
Twitter locks Trump's account following video addressing Washington riots. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on Wednesday removed a video by President Donald Trump addressing Washington riots. The statement comes as riots in support of President Donald Trump breached the U.S. Capitol, forcing lawmakers to evacuate. Meanwhile, calls are mounting for Twitter and Facebook to suspend Trump's account. Biden expected to pick Merrick Garland as Attorney General. Garland, 68, has been nominated to the Supreme Court by President Barack Obama. And Speaker Pelosi says Congress to resume counting of electoral votes Wednesday evening after the Capitol cleared for pro-Trump occupants. So once it is all cleared and safe, they will resume the vote and counting. And let's take a look at your U.S. stock market right now and see how your U.S. stock market closed for this Wednesday evening on this crazy historic day. And here's a check of the U.S. stock market for all of you. Your Dow Jones Industrial Average closed in the green one up. Your Nasdaq closed in the red one down. Your S&P 500 closed in the green one up. Gold closed in the green one up. Oil closed in the red one down. U.S. 10-year closed flat. Euro/USD closed in the green one up. And VIX closed in the red and went down. And that is a look at your U.S. stock market for this Wednesday evening. And now let's take a look at the weather across the United States. And here's a look at your weather across the United States for tonight. In Boston, it'll be 29 degrees. New York, 32 degrees. Washington, D.C., 32 degrees. Atlanta, 35 degrees. Jacksonville, Florida, 48 degrees. Tampa Bay, Florida, 50 degrees. Miami, Florida, 60 degrees. Dallas, Texas, 44 degrees. Phoenix, 42 degrees. Las Vegas, 37 degrees. Los Angeles, 49 degrees. And San Francisco, 45 degrees. And that is a look at the weather across the United States for this evening. And thank you for joining us for this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network, on this crazy and sad day in the United States, seeing the U.S. Capitol building getting swarmed by protesters. Thank you for joining us for this evening. Let's take a look at the Capitol building. We leave you with a view of the Capitol building this evening. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. Good night. See you tomorrow with more news coverage. Bye.